The woman was on my porch again. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, clipboard clutched like a holy relic. She looked like every bad HOA meme rolled into one. She hadn't even knocked. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you're squatting in my friend's house before I call the police," she barked, arms crossed like she owned the place. I stared at her, confused but calm. "Your friend? Lady, I just bought this house last week. I'm the landlord now." "Got the deed to prove it," her lip curled. "That's impossible. Evelyn Karter doesn't sell. She's been on this street longer than I've been president of the HOA, and I've been president since 2006. There it was. The power trip. The HOA president card. I'd only been in the neighborhood 3 days, and I already knew I was dealing with a classic HOA Karen. Her name? Beverly. Of course it was. I handed her a copy of the sale agreement, notarized and everything. Evelyn Karter moved to Arizona. I bought the place as a rental. She even left me a list of her favorite neighbors. You're not on it. She didn't even glance at the papers. Fake, you're a squatter, and I'm going to make sure the HOA takes legal action. I blinked. You can't just accuse someone of squatting because you don't like them. I can and I will, she snapped. We have rules here, and I don't recall approving any new landlords. That's when I realized she wasn't just mad I was here, she was furious she'd lost control of the house next to her. I had unknowingly moved into the one property she thought she could micromanage forever. My name's Isaac Feller. I'm a quiet guy, usually. I like fixing up old homes, renting them out to responsible tenants. I don't like drama, but Beverly apparently lived off it. The next morning, I woke up to a bright orange notice duct taped to my door. Immediate HOA review required illegal occupancy. The kicker. It was signed by Beverly herself. I laughed, pulled it off, and walked straight to my home office. I wasn't just a landlord, I'd also gone through law school. Never practiced, but I knew what a legal occupancy looked like. I printed off the county records, the deed, inspection reports, and my email chain with Evelyn. I stapled them neatly and walked them right over to the HOA clubhouse that afternoon. Beverly was inside, sipping iced tea like she was the queen of the cul-de-sac. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me. "Did you come to confess?" she asked, feigning concern. "It's not too late to leave quietly." I dropped the folder on the table in front of her. "Nope." "Came to educate." She opened it, scanned the first page, then slammed it shut. "This doesn't change anything," she hissed. "You may own the house, but the HOA didn't approve you. We have bylaws, Mr. Feller." "Great," I said. "Then I'll sit in on the next board meeting and we can go over them together. I'd love to see where must get Beverly's blessing is written down." She stood up fast. "You're not welcome here." "And yet, I legally own the house next to yours," I said, turning to leave. "See you at the meeting." I knew where this was going. Beverly wasn't just power-hungry. She was used to everyone caving the moment she raised her voice. But I've handled eviction cases nastier than her temper. If she wanted to play legal chicken with me, I hoped she had airbags. Because Beverly had no idea she didn't just pick a fight with a landlord. She picked a fight with the new owner of her ex-best friend's house. And I wasn't going anywhere. HOA story, HOA stories, Homeowners Association stories. The HOA board meeting was held in a stale multipurpose room that smelled like dry erase markers and stale cookies. I arrived early, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to see who Beverly had wrapped around her finger. The room slowly filled with residents, some in polos, others in lawn care uniforms. A few retirees with tired eyes like they'd seen this circus before. Beverly entered last, flanked by 2 board members who looked more like her personal assistants than elected volunteers. One carried a stack of manila folders. The other was still chewing something. As she took her seat at the head of the table, she scanned the room and locked eyes with me. No irritation this time, just calculation. "Before we begin tonight's agenda," Beverly said, clearing her throat into the microphone though she didn't need it. "There's a matter of property legitimacy that requires urgent attention." A man in a faded windbreaker leaned over to me. That code for she lost control of something, you must be the new guy. I nodded once. He extended a hand. Stan, I've lived here 23 years. Welcome to the asylum, Beverly continued. The house at 1185 Brookside, formerly owned by Evelyn Karter, is currently under suspicious occupation by an individual with no HOA clearance. I stood. I'm right here, Isaac Feller. I own the property. Purchased it through a legal sale recorded with the county. I have full documentation. Beverly waved dismissively. You submitted a packet, the board reviewed it, however we found inconsistencies. That caught my attention. Such as, she tapped a folder dramatically. The seller's signature doesn't match archived records from previous HOA declarations. I blinked. You're comparing a signature from a real estate sale to a neighborhood newsletter from 20 years ago. We take authenticity seriously, she said. I walked to the front, pulled out a certified copy of the notarized deed transfer and placed it on the table. Here's the legal document recorded by the county clerk. Notarized, witnessed, time-stamped. If you're accusing me of forgery, say it clearly. Because that's a criminal accusation. The room shifted. Someone coughed. A woman near the back scribbled something on a notepad. Beverly's voice cracked slightly. We're not accusing. We're investigating, which is entirely within our authority under Bylaw Section 32. Stan leaned forward. Section 32 is about lawn height. A chuckle rippled through the room. Beverly glared at him. Fine, then Section 7, Paragraph 9, property conduct. That's about noise complaints, Stan added louder this time. I turned to the board. Is there a legitimate reason I'm being blocked from renting my property? A woman with silver hair and a precise bun leaned toward her microphone. Has the HOA ever denied a landlord before? Beverly answered before anyone else could. This is different. How? The woman asked. Beverly hesitated. Because it's next to my house, and Evelyn had an agreement with me. There it was. Finally out loud, I stepped back. A personal agreement isn't legally binding. Unless it's recorded in a deed restriction, it's irrelevant. Beverly's jaw tightened. You're combative. No, I said. Just educated. After the meeting, several residents approached me quietly. Most just wanted to wish me luck. A few offered stories how Beverly had fined them for wind-blown trash cans, how she'd blocked a family's fence remodel because she didn't like the color. One man whispered that his cousin had moved out because she'd been cited 4 times for overly exuberant Halloween decor. I started noting down details, names, dates, patterns. 2 days later, I got a certified letter from the HOA. Notice of non-compliance, unauthorized rental activity. It claimed my property violated an owner-occupant preferred clause in the bylaws, but there was no such clause. I drove to city zoning and pulled the official HOA registration documents. Beverly had never filed the latest bylaw amendments with the city, rendering them unenforceable. She'd been bluffing with paperwork that technically didn't exist. I returned home just in time to see a man in a red vest snapping photos of my roof. I stepped outside. Problem? I asked. He lowered his phone. Roof's got discoloration. Beverly sent me to document potential code violations. It was power washed last week, I said. You're trespassing, he shrugged. She told me it was part of her inspection protocol. I pointed at the edge of my driveway. This is private property. Cross that line again and I'll have you cited. He left without another word. Later that evening, I installed 2 high-resolution cameras, one facing the front yard, one aimed at the side gate. I wasn't going to wait for Beverly to invent another violation. 3 days passed quietly. Then I got a call from Detective Marla Trent with the city's Property Crimes Division. We received an anonymous tip that you're squatting in that house on Brookside, she said. But I ran your name through the assessor's office. You're the legal owner. Anonymous tip, I asked, already knowing. Yes, but here's where it gets strange. The person claimed to be a board officer of the HOA and submitted a copy of a corrected deed showing that the sale was reversed. My stomach dropped. Can you send me that document? She did. I opened the attachment and stared at a laughably forged deed reversal, signed with a crooked version of Evelyn's name spelled wrong. My voice stayed even. That's fraud. It's not even cleverly done. That's what I figured, Detective Trent said. But submitting false legal documents to law enforcement, that's not a slap on the wrist offense. Is there a return address? She paused. It was dropped off in person. Security footage shows a woman in a beige Lexus SUV with HOA magnets on the doors. Beverly. I sent her the real deed, the time-stamped sale, and Evelyn's notarized letter confirming the transaction. Then I asked if they'd be pursuing charges. It's under review, she said. But if this isn't the first time she's done something like this, we'd love statements. I spent the rest of the day collecting them. Stan came first, then the woman with the notepad. Then 4 more residents who'd been fined, harassed, or accused of fabricated infractions that never appeared in the minutes. One had even found a listening device hidden in a bush near her porch. Beverly claimed it was a birdwatcher's tool. By the end of the week, I had 9 affidavits and over a dozen video clips showing Beverly or her proxies entering private yards, photographing interiors through windows, and threatening to revoke compliance without any legal basis. I submitted them all. The police weren't the only ones interested. A local investigative reporter showed up at my door. She'd been tipped off by an anonymous resident, probably Stan's wife, who had a way of accidentally overhearing everything. "I'm working on a piece about HOA overreach," the reporter said. "Seems your story might be the keystone." I gave her everything: the forged deed, the security footage, the resident statements, and the kicker, Evelyn's voicemail from the day she left where she said, "Don't let Beverly bully you. She thinks she owns the street." 1 week later, the news segment aired. They blurred my house, but Beverly's car was unmistakable. The forged document was displayed on screen. The reporter ended the piece with, "We reached out to the HOA president for comment. She declined." That same night, an emergency HOA meeting was called, not by Beverly but by the treasurer and the secretary, who'd had enough. When I walked in, Beverly was already standing, red-faced and talking too fast. "I have served this community with dedication. You submitted forged documents to the police," the treasurer interrupted. "You impersonated a legal process. I was protecting neighborhood integrity. You committed a felony." The room went quiet. And for the first time since I arrived on Brookside Lane, Beverly didn't have the last word. The morning after the emergency meeting, Beverly's beige SUV was gone from her driveway. The HOA magnets had been peeled off the doors, leaving faint rectangular outlines where the paint had slightly faded. Her porch light was on, though, burning in broad daylight like no one had remembered to shut it off. Some neighbors stood in their driveways, pretending to water plants or check mail that hadn't arrived yet. Everyone was watching the house, but no one approached it. By noon, a pair of unmarked sedans parked along the curb. 2 plainclothes detectives stepped out, one carrying a box, the other a manila envelope. They didn't knock. They walked straight to Beverly's front door. It opened before they reached it. Detective Trent had called me earlier that morning. "She's not being arrested yet," she'd said. "But we're executing a search warrant. The forgery was enough to get that signed. We're also looking into misappropriation of funds." Her name's on every check the HOA issued for the last 5 years, and some of them are going to contractors that don't exist. The door closed behind the officers. Curtains twitched up and down the street. I stayed on my porch, a mug of coffee in my hand, eyes fixed on the house that had made everyone else's lives harder for years. By mid-afternoon, they carried out 3 boxes and a desktop computer tower. One detective returned to the car, the other stayed behind, speaking to someone on the phone while pacing up and down the walkway. Beverly didn't come out. Her car was still in the garage. The next board meeting was held without her. The treasurer, a soft-spoken man named Harold, took temporary leadership. He opened the meeting with a single quiet sentence: "We are no longer under Beverly's direction." A woman in the second row clapped twice before stopping herself. A few others nodded solemnly. No one smiled. Harold continued. We'll be conducting a full audit of HOA funds, contracts, and enforcement activity for the last decade. We've hired an independent CPA to assist. I stood. Has the board been notified which documents are under subpoena? He nodded once. The police collected everything from the office this morning. They left a temporary seal on the door. Until the audit is complete, we're suspending all enforcement actions. A man near the back raised his hand. What about the citations she issued that went unpaid? Some of us were threatened with liens. We're voiding them pending review, Harold said. No liens will be filed. If any were, we'll assist in reversing them. A murmur of disbelief swept through the room. Another man stood. She made me pay a fine for having a basketball hoop in my driveway. Said it was obstructing community flow. She fined me for chalk drawings, someone else said. I want that money back, said an older woman near the aisle, with interest. I waited until the room quieted, then I asked, has anyone spoken to Evelyn Karter? Harold looked up. No. Why? She may have more information. Beverly claimed they had private agreements. That might explain some of the forged clauses, he nodded. We'll reach out. After the meeting, I walked the block. People were outside now, more than usual. You could feel it, the shift. Like a pressure valve had been released. Lawn chairs were out, dogs on leashes, kids drawing hopscotch boards on the sidewalk. Nobody was whispering anymore. Stan waved me over from his porch. You see what happens when someone pushes back? I sat beside him. It's not over yet. She's finished, he said. You don't come back from trying to forge a deed. I didn't answer. He was probably right, but something still wasn't sitting right with me. 2 days later, I got a call from Evelyn. She sounded sharp as ever, voice clipped but warm. I heard what happened, she said. Beverly always was 2 steps from a nervous breakdown with a clipboard. Did she ever talk to you about selling your house back to the HOA? She laughed. Good heavens, no. She begged me not to sell to a landlord, but I told her she didn't own my signature. I left that house fair and square. Any chance she had access to old documents, ones with your original signature? I left a few things in the HOA file cabinet over the years, but nothing important. Why? She tried to fake a deed reversal, claimed you changed your mind. Silence. Then, well. If she did that, she's a fool. My attorney notarized every page, and I have copies. Mind if I forward that to the police? Do it. And tell Beverly I hope she finds a new hobby. I hung up and forwarded the files to Detective Trent. She responded within the hour. We've got enough. The DA's office is preparing a felony forgery charge, possibly wire fraud, depending on what we find in the emails we seized. That weekend, a sheriff's cruiser parked outside Beverly's house. 2 deputies stepped out. This time she opened the door slowly, hands raised slightly like she'd been expecting them. They walked her out without cuffs. But the moment the cruiser door closed, someone on the sidewalk started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the entire street joined in a slow, steady rhythm of applause. Not loud, not mocking, just final. She didn't look back. The next month passed quickly. The CPA finished their audit. Turns out, Beverly had been funneling HOA funds into a shell landscaping company registered under her cousin's name. Over $20,000 had been paid for non-existent services, aesthetic maintenance, decorative compliance, and seasonal enhancements that no one had ever seen. The board filed a civil suit. The DA filed criminal charges. Her cousin was arrested too. The neighborhood newsletter, previously written entirely by Beverly, was now run by 3 rotating volunteers. The first issue was titled, A New Chapter for Brookside. It included a list of revoked fines, a hotline for HOA abuse reports, and a QR code linking to the new bylaws which had been rewritten with legal counsel. At the next meeting, Harold made an announcement. We're opening nominations for permanent board officers. No more unchallenged terms, no more appointments without votes. When the floor opened, someone nominated me. I declined. I wasn't there to run things, I just wanted to protect what was mine, but I did nominate Stan. He looked surprised. I don't even own a printer. You've got something better memory, and people trust you, he won unanimously. As I walked home, a man I hadn't met before approached me. You're the landlord, right? I nodded. I was thinking of renting out my place, too. You have a good tenant application process, strict credit checks, background screening, and I meet them in person. Gut check always wins, he nodded. Good, I want to do it right. This neighborhood deserves better than what she gave it, I agreed. Later that week, I received a letter from the county courthouse. Beverly had posted bail but was under house arrest at her sister's place 5 towns over. Her trial date was set for 2 months from now. Maximum penalty for her charges, 15 years. The last time I saw her was in a grainy courtroom sketch on the news. Hair pulled back, eyes down. Her attorney did all the talking. Evelyn sent me a thank you card with a cactus magnet tucked inside. Arizona's lovely, she wrote in blocky cursive. But I do miss watching that woman lose arguments with her mailbox. Brookside Lane changed after that. People planted things without asking first. Kids left bikes in driveways without being fined. The HOA meetings were shorter, less tense, more donuts. And once in a while, someone would come by my house and thank me not for fighting back, but for staying, for not folding under pressure, for showing them that power only lasts as long as people let it. Turns out, when you shine a light on corruption, it shrinks fast. Especially when it's hiding behind a clipboard. A week before Beverly's trial, I was asked to testify. I had already submitted all my documentation, recorded deed, notarized letters, and the video footage, but the ADA wanted my testimony to help establish intent. Beverly hadn't just made a mistake. She had orchestrated a series of deliberate actions to retain control over a property she no longer had any claim to. And it wasn't just mine. The audit uncovered a pattern of forged violations tied to properties adjacent to board members' homes. In several cases, these violations had coincided with offers to purchase the homes at below-market value offers made by shell companies registered to acquaintances of Beverly's cousin. It wasn't just HOA harassment anymore. It was organized real estate fraud. I sat down with Assistant District Attorney Melissa Harlan in a conference room at the courthouse. She had sharp features, a dry wit, and a binder 3 inches thick labeled Kensington Ridge HOA v. Beverly Alcott. She didn't just want your house back, Melissa said, flipping to a page marked with a red tab. She wanted the entire south corridor of the neighborhood under her thumb. 11 of the last 16 citations issued were to homeowners with paid-off mortgages. That's not random. She was trying to scare people into selling, I said. She already succeeded in 3 cases. 2 of those homes were later flipped by her cousin's company. We're still tracing the money trail, but it's looking like wire fraud, coercion, and possibly elder exploitation. I leaned back. So this goes deeper than a fake deed, Melissa nodded. You were just the one who wouldn't fold. The trial was scheduled for a Tuesday. It wasn't open to the public, but word spread fast. By the time I arrived at the courthouse, a small group of residents had gathered outside, some holding handwritten signs. None were aggressive. Most just watched quietly, carrying folders of documentation in case they were called to testify. Inside, Beverly sat between her defense attorney and a court-appointed assistant. She wore a slate gray blouse, her hair tied tightly back, expression unreadable. Not defiant, not ashamed, just distant, like she detached herself from everything happening around her. She didn't look at me when I took the stand. Mr. Feller, Melissa began, can you walk the court through how you became involved with the defendant? I detailed the day I moved in, the first confrontation on my porch, the fake violation notices, the anonymous tip that triggered the police visit. I avoided editorializing, just facts. Melissa guided the pace with surgical precision. Did the defendant ever attempt to contact you through formal legal channels? She asked. No, I replied. All communication was informal notes, verbal accusations, and one forged document submitted to law enforcement. She held up the fabricated deed reversal. "Is this the document in question?" "Yes, that's the one I received a copy of from Detective Trent." Melissa walked over to the judge's bench. "Your Honor, we'd like to admit this into evidence as Exhibit 17. The judge nodded. So entered. When Beverly's attorney cross-examined me, his strategy was to imply confusion rather than malice. "Is it possible," he asked, "that my client genuinely believed she had a right to intervene in property transitions within the HOA? She submitted a document with the seller's name misspelled and claimed it voided a county-recorded sale," I answered. "That's not confusion. That's fabrication." He changed tactics. "Did you ever attempt to de-escalate the situation?" "I submitted my documents to the HOA and attended their meetings," I said. She responded by photographing my property, dispatching unauthorized inspectors, and filing a false police report. He didn't ask another question. When I stepped down, Melissa called Stan as the next witness. He brought a notebook filled with handwritten notes. In his calm, gravelly tone, he described the years Beverly had spent intimidating residents, how she'd used the HOA as a personal tool to reward allegiance and punish disagreement. "She fined me for putting out a political sign," he said. "I checked the bylaws. There's no rule against it." "Did you bring that sign with you today?" Melissa asked. Stan nodded and held up a faded lawn sign from a city council election 3 years ago. The courtroom chuckled softly. Even the judge's mouth twitched. The final witness was a woman named Mara who had sold her house 2 years ago under pressure. She was in her 60s, wore a pressed suit, and carried a folder of banking records. "She told me my property was going to be condemned if I didn't comply," Mara said. "Said my foundation was unstable and that I'd be liable if someone got hurt. Then 2 months later, I got a letter offering to buy the home for cash and convenience." "Was that letter from a company called Circle Pine Developments?" Melissa asked. "Yes. Would you recognize the name on the signature line?" Mara opened the folder. "It was signed by a man named Grayson Alcott." Melissa turned to the jury. "The defendant's cousin. The defense didn't cross-examine her." In closing arguments, Melissa laid everything out without embellishment: the forged documents, the intimidation, the self-dealing. She didn't need to dramatize it. The facts were damning enough. When the jury returned 2 hours later, the room went still. Beverly didn't look up. The foreperson read the verdicts one by one. Guilty. On all counts. The judge sentenced her immediately, citing the overwhelming evidence and the number of victims impacted. "Beverly Alcott," he said, "you manipulated your neighbors, falsified legal documents, and undermined the trust placed in community governance. These actions were not only illegal, they were corrosive. You are hereby sentenced to 12 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 7. There was no reaction from Beverly. She stood, hands behind her back, and walked out of the courtroom between 2 deputies. Not a word, not a glance at anyone. The fallout hit the neighborhood immediately. The shell companies were dissolved. The funds were traced through a tangle of accounts and eventually seized by the state. Those who had been coerced into selling were offered restitution through a class action lawsuit. Mara and 2 others received settlements equal to the market value of their homes plus damages. The HOA was placed under temporary city oversight. A neutral auditor reviewed all future enforcement actions, and a new charter was adopted that required full transparency for any board communications or spending. On a Saturday morning 3 weeks later, the neighborhood held a cleanup day not for trash, but for paperwork. Residents brought old violation notices, outdated bylaws, and shredded every last remnant of Beverly's rule. Someone brought donuts. Someone else brought a Bluetooth speaker. It felt like a block party disguised as civic duty. Stan was officially elected HOA president in July. His first act was to propose a cap on fines and a mandatory third-party review for any violation over $50. It passed unanimously. I stayed on as landlord, but I added a new clause to my lease agreements. Tenants were encouraged, though not required, to attend HOA meetings and vote on matters that affected the neighborhood. Engagement, I'd learned, was the best defense. One afternoon, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with no salutation, just a sentence written in neat cursive. "You were the first person who didn't flinch. Thank you." No signature. But I recognized the handwriting. It was Mara. I folded the note and taped it inside the cabinet above my desk. Not for ego, just as a reminder. Power can't survive daylight, and all it takes to bring it down is one person who won't look away.